Hey everybody, it's Doug from Rock Creek Runner, and this is Trail Talk. Alright, welcome to the first edition of Trail Talk. My name is Doug Hay, and I'm really excited to be speaking with you today from my deck in beautiful western North Carolina. You can see the leaves are changing, there's a little bit of crisp in the air, you might even be able to see my breath. We're going to try to do this outside. I don't know if there's going to be too much background noise to make that happen in future videos, but we're going to give it a shot this time. Since this is the first time I'm doing one of these, I thought I'd go ahead and jump right in and answer the question that is probably the most asked question on the website, and that is, how do you know if you're ready to run an ultramarathon? Lots of people who are readers have run half marathons, maybe even a few marathons, and they're interested in making the transition to an ultramarathon, but they just don't know where to start and if they're ready to start. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about how to know if you're ready to make the leap from a marathon or a shorter distance to the ultramarathon distance. When someone asks me if they're ready to run an ultramarathon, the first thing I say is, do you want to run an ultramarathon? And if they answer yes, then my answer is yes, you're ready to run an ultramarathon. You might need a little more build up to get to the point of actually running the race, but the first step in deciding if you're ready to run an ultra or not is to actually decide that you want to run an ultra, because running an ultramarathon is a huge commitment, both building up during training and, of course, when you're out there on race day and you're feeling low, and if there's no motivation behind it, then it's just not going to work. So you have to really want to run an ultra, just like you probably really wanted to run a marathon or really wanted to run a half marathon. You have to really want that ultra to make it work. Ultramarathons are a huge goal. They require a lot from your family, they require some financial commitment, and they certainly require the time. So knowing and deciding why it is that you want to run that ultramarathon is definitely the first step. But that's not really what people want to hear. They want to know is, do they have to run a marathon beforehand, and if so, and if not, how much distance do they need to be running comfortably to be ready to run an ultra? So the first question is, do you have to have run a marathon before you can run an ultramarathon? No, I don't believe so. I'm a firm believer that anyone can run an ultramarathon. They just need to have the time and build up to get there. And that may or may not include a marathon. You don't have to have distance experience. Although it certainly helps, you don't have to have that under your belt before you start training for an ultramarathon. Of course, if you are only running 10 miles a week, then you're going to need a lot more time to progress into the ultramarathon distance than you would if you were just coming off of a marathon. In fact, I think that if you can run a marathon today, then you can run an ultramarathon today too. You can run that 50K. It might hurt, and you might suffer a lot more than if you had trained specifically for that 50K, but you can probably get across the finish line without too much trouble, and you could do it. You could do it today, like I said. So if you've run a marathon, then it certainly helps. But if you haven't, don't worry. You don't have to do that whole training first. We can jump straight into the ultramarathon training plan. So in the ideal scenario, how much mileage should you be running before you start officially training for an ultramarathon? My ultramarathon training plans are 20-week training plans, and they start with people running comfortably 20 to 30 miles per week. You should be able to have no trouble running a 10-mile or 12-mile long run on the weekends. So if you're not there yet, then you need to be building up a bigger base leading up to those 20-week training plans, which is pretty standard for most ultramarathon training plans. Now, of course, you can build in those weekly or that base building period into a longer training plan if you want to do a 30-week plan or something like that. But before you start training for 50K or even a 50-mile ultramarathon, then you probably need to be comfortable running 10 to 12 miles as your long run, and roughly 25 miles per week as your standard weekly mileage. From there, you'll quickly start building up, which is why I say comfortably run the 10 to 12 mile long run, because you'll quickly move from 10 to 12 to 15 and progress all the way up, depending on what ultramarathon distance you're running, you'll progress all the way up to a marathon or higher within your training. So being very comfortable with that 10-mile, 12-mile long run is really important. So the next part of the question that everybody wants to know is, can they continue to have a life if they're training for an ultramarathon? So they may know that they have the weekly mileage base. They feel comfortable with the 25 to 30 miles. They feel comfortable with the 12-mile long run. Maybe they've even run a few marathons and they feel comfortable at that distance. But they don't know if they're ready to commit to the time that it takes to train for an ultra. What I always like to say is that yes, it's going to take more time, but no, you're not going to need to ruin your life. No, you're not going to need to quit your job. Yes, you will still be able to go to happy hour with your friends. And of course, you can still fulfill your commitments to your family. Now, that being said, it is going to take longer to, you are going to have to put in more time to train for an ultra than you did a marathon. The weekday mileage isn't going to be that much different. So if you're only running from the house on the road, that 5 to 7 or 8 miles a day that you're running, that's going to be no problem. You're still going to be able to do that, similar to what you were doing with the marathon. But the weekend mileage, the long run mileage, is going to be a little longer, and it's going to be a little more time consuming because you're probably going to be running it on trails. Most ultramarathons are trail runs, although there is a growing amount of road ultramarathons that are available to people all over the world, but most, in general, ultramarathons are trail runs. And if you're running a trail ultramarathon, you're going to want to be training on trails. The last thing you're going to do is sign up for a trail ultra, not have any experience on trails, and have to learn how to run trails during the race, because it's just not going to happen. You're going to be so sore in different muscles that you don't normally work when you're running the road, and it's just going to make such a worse experience for your first ultramarathon if you don't have a lot of trail running under your belt. So, trail running does typically take a little longer than road running. Your pace is going to be slower. You might even be doing some hiking up the hills, that kind of thing. And so that 20-mile long run that maybe took you 3 hours during marathon training on the road will take you maybe even 4.5 hours on the trail. So you're going to need to factor that in. Of course, you're going to be running more frequent long runs, more frequently longer long runs, so maybe multiple 18-milers, some that are all the way up to the marathon distance. If you're training for a 50-miler, you might be running even a 50K distance as part of your training. So you're going to have to factor that into your time commitment as you speak to your family about this decision, or as you talk to your friends about what it's going to mean for you to train for an ultra. But you can absolutely still have a life. It's not going to be that much more time consuming than a marathon, and you can prepare for that ahead of time. So before we get into the next steps as to what you should be doing, let's back up a little bit to just review exactly where it is you need to be before you sign up for an ultramarathon. So first of all, you want to make sure that you're willing to and excited to run an ultramarathon. Decide why it is that you've set that goal, and really believe in it. Have faith in that decision, because it will be hard at times, and you will be doubting yourself. So really having that to fall back on is crazy important. 2, you don't have to have run an ultramarathon or a marathon prior to training for an ultra, but having that endurance distance running certainly helps. But you do want to be comfortable running 10 to 12 miles as your long run on a weekly basis, and be comfortable with roughly 25 miles per week as your base mileage. So anywhere from 20 to 30 will work, but 25 is probably, or higher, is where you want to be. And then 3rd, you need to be willing to commit a little bit more time to the training than you would during a marathon training, a road marathon training. But again, you don't have to give up your entire life to run this ultramarathon, even if maybe you're so excited about it you want to. But you don't have to do that. You don't have to give up your friends and or your job, and you can continue to fulfill all of your family obligations that you might have. So if you can say yes and check those 3 things off, then I believe that you're ready to do it. So The next steps would, of course, be to start trail running if you're not doing so already, to get comfortable on those trails, building that into your weekly mileage, your weekly training program, and really start to become comfortable on the trails. Step 2 would be to find a training plan. There's tons of resources on rockcreekrunner.com and training plans and different ultramarathon beginner ultramarathon advice on the site, but there's other books and other resources that you can certainly find that provide ultramarathon training plans. So finding that plan and understanding it, beginning to make sure that you're ready to start on week 1, so whatever mileage is required for week 1, and start building up that way. And my third advice on the next step would be to find some friends who are running ultras, join a trail running group or community. Find an online community. Ask around with your friends. Chances are you have someone within your circle that at least knows somebody who runs ultramarathons, and talk to them about it. Tell them where you are. See where they recommend that you should be, and hopefully they can tap you into a number of other people within your community that will both be supportive throughout the training and supportive on making the decision and helping you decide where to run your first ultra, when, and how to get started. So thanks again for spending time with me today on the first edition of Trail Talk. Hopefully I have answered your question about whether or not you are ready to run an ultramarathon. And if you're not, then hopefully you can take the steps to get there. And if you are, I am so excited for you, because it will be a life-changing experience that I look forward to hopefully being a part of. So if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments on YouTube, or you can tweet at me at rockcreekrunner, and I will answer your questions as soon as possible. So until next time, see you on the trails.